Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a truly fascinating, highly specific philosophical framework. We're actually diving into a recent lecture that attempts to connect the grand cosmic laws of the universe directly to modern-day political unrest in South Korea. I know, it sounds wild, but understanding obscure cultural frameworks like this one can actually be incredibly helpful for making sense of complex global political phenomena. It is a totally unique perspective, one that blends cosmic ratios, alternative history, and some really stinging political commentary into one massive overarching narrative. So let's just dive right in and see how all these pieces fit together.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The Universal 3-7 Law, 2. Evolution and the Empire Era, 3. Pruning the Global Tree, 4. The Era of Growth, 5. The Second Inflection Point, and finally, 6. Uncovering the Hidden Pests.
All right, part 1, the Universal 3-7 Law. So the entire source material really hinges on this one concept the speaker calls the 3-7 Law. According to this proposed universal rule, absolutely all development, whether you're talking about a single human life or the entire arc of human history, always happens in two distinct phases. First, you've got a 30% evolution phase. This is described as this primitive time where humanity is just actively trying to shed its animalistic, instinct-driven nature. Then, once we finally cross that 30% threshold, we enter the 70% growth phase, and that period is entirely dedicated to maturing into our true enlightened human potential.
It's actually pretty amazing how the speaker maps us out, showing how deeply this law is supposedly woven into the very fabric of reality. The lecture argues that this 3-to-7 ratio isn't just some nice metaphor, it's physically real. Like the speaker points out that the Earth itself is roughly 70% water and 30% land. They even apply it to the human body, saying we're made up of about 70% water and 30% solid matter. So the big takeaway here is that this philosophy views the 3-to-7 ratio as this inescapable cosmic blueprint that governs nature, the universe, and, as we're about to see, all of human civilization.
Moving on to part 2, Evolution and the Empire Era.
According to the source, the first 30% of human history was our messy, instinct-driven evolution. During this time, humanity was basically acting like animals, right? Prioritizing survival, territory, total dominance. And this primal drive resulted in forced expansion and the rise of these massive global empires. The speaker actually calls out the British, French, American, and Chinese empires as direct products of this evolutionary stage. But notice how Korea is positioned here. The speaker claims that Joseon, which is historical Korea, resisted this imperial urge entirely. It successfully remained a single, perfectly preserved nation while the rest of the globe was just consumed by empire building.
Which brings us to part 3, Pruning the Global Tree.
To describe the violent end of that 30% evolution phase, the speaker uses this really striking and honestly pretty dark metaphor: pruning the roots and branches of a massive old tree. The idea is, just like a gardener has to aggressively cut back an overgrown tree so it can actually thrive later, the universe had to aggressively trim the human population to kickstart our next phase of growth. The speaker points directly to the catastrophic loss of life during the First and Second World Wars as this exact cosmic resetting mechanism. Now, I want to be clear. The source makes some highly controversial claims here. The argument is that this cosmic pruning intentionally eliminated both the marginalized and the highly capable, specifically citing highly successful Jewish populations and prominent Koreans as a way to physically balance humanity before the next era could begin. So in this framework, the world wars weren't just geopolitical conflicts, they were a brutal, mathematically mandated cosmic reset. The lecture even puts specific numerical anchors on the aftermath of this first inflection point. To put that into perspective, the speaker claims the cosmic pruning deliberately left exactly 3 billion people on Earth to start the new era. Meanwhile, it explicitly left 30 million people in Korea, which the speaker refers to as the roots of the global tree. These survivors were cosmically meant to be the core foundation for the next stage of human civilization.
Let's move to part 4, the Era of Growth.
Following 1945, from those remaining 30 million Koreans, the post-war baby boomer generation was born, and this marked the start of true growth. In 1948, to really solidify this new era, the nation shed its old evolutionary name, Joseon, and officially became the Republic of Korea, adopting a brand new national anthem. On top of that, the speaker claims Taekwondo was established during this time, not just as a martial art, but as a mandatory spiritual and physical training system designed to mature these new citizens. And finally, perfectly aligning with that 70% growth metric, the global population eventually swelled to the 7 billion mark. Basically, humanity was growing exactly as the cosmic law dictated.
Part 5. The second inflection point. The speaker identifies a very precise date for the end of the 70% growth phase, December 21st, 2012. On this exact day, the theory states that humanity's long period of simply growing and maturing was officially over. We were fully grown. It was time for a second massive inflection point. Now, what should have happened right after 2012 was an era of profound reorganization. Society was supposed to harness all that immense energy from its fully mature citizens to lead and innovate. But the speaker argues that reality took a pretty dark turn. Instead of some great enlightenment, South Korea and really the world at large entered over a decade of aimless stagnation. Because leadership completely failed to provide any direction, these mature citizens had no outlet for their energy. According to the source, this left the public weakened, drained, and totally directionless. And finally, Part 6, Uncovering the Hidden Pests. The speaker highlights that during the growth era, the blood, sweat, and sacrifices of everyday people successfully built three massive pillars of society: the government, religious institutions, and massive corporations. These organizations were perfectly constructed to lead humanity into the future. But because that critical transition in 2012 was totally mishandled, these beautiful structures were left completely vulnerable. In this total vacuum of true leadership, the speaker introduces a really potent metaphor, the Jungbub, which roughly translates to bookworms or pests. The lecture claims that opportunistic individuals rapidly infested these three great pillars of society. Instead of actually working for the public good, these pests engaged in bitter, factional infighting. They focused entirely on hoarding power, and they just started shamelessly exploiting public taxes for their own gain. Essentially, the great societal structures began rotting from the inside out. Now, the source makes some incredibly charged political claims here, arguing that starting around 2013, completely ignorant leaders allowed these systemic pests to fully thrive and multiply. The speaker explicitly blames these pests for orchestrating election fraud and engineering the unjust removal and impeachment of presidents. So in this specific framework, the recent years of extreme political turmoil in South Korea aren't just standard partisan politics. The claim is that they are the direct result of corrupt individuals exploiting a cosmic failure to properly transition into a new era. And that leaves us here, at the end of the explainer, with a pretty chilling final warning from the speaker. The claim is that all the corruption and political unrest we've seen so far, it's just the tip of the iceberg. As we continue to suffer through this botched inflection point, the speaker warns that the pests are multiplying, and a whole wave of massive, previously hidden truths is about to be forced into the light. Whether you view this as a grand cosmic truth or just a fascinating cultural lens for processing political frustration, it leaves us with one heck of a question. If a cosmic law truly dictates our political reality, what massive hidden truths are going to be exposed next? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep questioning and keep learning.